Hey, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well and welcome back to another SuperCoach Strategy Roundtable where we try to help you in these critical final few weeks of your SuperCoach season. If you're focused on your ranking, the good news is there's just 5 more painful weeks to sweat and worry about it, while for league coaches, rankings, who cares about that? It is all about the league, and you're fast pushing into finals, if not there, this week already. Joining me on this week's episode of the SuperCoach Strategy Roundtable, one of the regular parts of the Coaches Panel. After a long absence, he didn't need to do a Callum Mills and appear and disappear for a week. We were able to keep him back on the park 2 weeks in a row. MiniMonk, good to see you, mate.
I haven't got the general soreness. You can't keep me out of the best 23. I'm back. I'm staying on. And hopefully from now until the end of the season, the coach doesn't drop me.
Well, we'll see how we go. And then also on this episode, some of the great people in the SuperCoach community. I got to meet both of these guys back in March when a number of the Melbourne-based SuperCoach content creators all gathered together. The guys at Herald Sun Super Footy put it all together and connected, and just loved hanging out with the guys from Centre Bounce straight away. They're doing a power of great work in the SuperCoach community. Big J, Joe, welcome to your Coaches Panel debut, boys.
Thanks for having us on.
Really excited. Finally popping the cherry. A little bit late in the season, but hey, it's still relevant, and I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Is that a spoiler for later on in the episode?
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, maybe
Damn,
it is.
Nothing goes past you, man.
Nothing. Nothing at all. All right, boys, there's a ton of stuff we do have to talk to. I want to, at the end of this episode, I want to go line by line with you, and I'm going to push all three of you in to make a one top scorer per line prediction for us over the final 5 weeks. So I want to get your takes on who you think they're going to be and why. We've got to talk captaincy and the way we use our loopholing over these final 5 weeks, whether you've got trades left or for those that don't, this is one of the few spaces you can make up significant scoring ground, whether it be rankings or league focus. And then we do have to talk about the players that are coming off some one-week injuries. And there's one that maybe we should start off with that's got the longer-term injury. And we do need to replace a Tom Koning. 7.9 or 7.6 is the accurate number of coaches overall own Tom. He's been a brilliant pick, especially since the bye. He's been a brilliant kind of 6-week selection. I think his last 5 weeks, he's running at about that 120-plus marker. And unfortunately, a home and away season-ending injury for us in SuperCoach. Time to go. If we've got the luxury of a trade, I'm not making eye contact with MiniMonk. If you're watching this live, who has countlessly told us on YouTube that he doesn't have any trades left. So he's not a Koning owner, so he can't help you through that anyway. But for those that have a trade left, it is a trade. It's why you've stockpiled 1, 2, or 3 remaining. Big J, we might start with you and then work our way through everyone on this strategy roundtable. Who are the best options that we can get into? Koning's not cheap, so that's good news. We've got some money to play with, but who are the top prospects for Tom Koning owners to look to move off to?
It's actually really interesting, right? Because if you had a look at, let's go back a couple of weeks when I spent my last trade on Max Gawn, I didn't have enough money. I couldn't just downgrade to anyone because your likes of Nank and TDK, who are now both injured, unfortunately, were too more expensive. So I went to this certain player who is currently ranked 4th for tackles in the AFL, has a ceiling, or sorry, has a floor like no one else. He's getting like 10-plus tackles a game, and that's Big Tristan Cherry. That's who I brought in, and I think it's basically a straight swap and you net like 10K. Not that the 10K is going to matter, but yeah, the player's too good, his position's too good in the team, no one's threatening him or anything like that, and yeah, that's who I would bring in. I think his next few runs are really good too, and for an immediate impact, I mean, he's versing like Geelong, who give up a huge amount of points to Ruckman, so you're getting someone good straight in, and Helmet Cherry is a lot better than non-Helmet Cherry. That's what I'm going to say.
It certainly seems to be the case. Okay, so Cherry is Big J's one.
Yep.
MiniMonk will go to you, and then Big Joe's got one for us lined up too. I'm just putting Big in front of everybody's name today. I don't know why, but I'm just going to do it. MiniMonk, if you're replacing TDK, which big ruckman are you going into? Did you see what I did there? Did you see that?
Big
Did you
MiniMonk.
like that?
No big MiniMonk. It'd be a bit oxymoronic, wouldn't it?
That would sum up me pretty personally, actually.
Look, there is one that interests me, and he's got a relatively good run, aside from the last game of the season, and that's actually Riley O'Brien. And it's not one that I've actually seen being talked about by many coaches whatsoever. His next four, he's got Hawthorns, who's facing Ned Reeves, Geelong, so who knows who they're going to roll out, but it looks to be that Sam de Koning's the one they like in there. Western Bulldogs, and we know that English isn't the greatest tap ruckman, and that's something where Riley O'Brien really excels. And then Port Adelaide, who keep rolling out Jordan Sweet. Now, that round 24 matchup against Brodie Grundy, it doesn't look great. But in terms of a good 4 fixtures, it's pretty good. I wouldn't mind going there.
I like, and again, like, he's got some ceiling about him. Certainly not shown that all the times, but the matchups are right. There's a world where it could absolutely pop. And I love that you're giving, in Big J's case, the guy that this week, if there's ever a ruckman that could score a 200 this week, this feels like the matchup. And then where Mini's done is gone complete opposite territory of ownership percentage and really created some separation, which I really, really like. Joe, what about for you? Is there anyone you're interested to trade into as a TDK owner?
Those two boys definitely were the top two, I think, candidates. I know there's some people who might be looking around and looking at the fixture, I suppose, the run to come, especially, if you've got a trade, his might be your last one. And you probably want someone who might offer you a bit of maybe DPP. If you haven't got a Luke Jackson, for example, could be someone, and you've got like a Kruger and a Livingston, for example, you've now got some pretty good swing, I suppose, in between the forward line and the ruck line. Obviously, it's not super potty, but it is an option, and it's not like his run is necessarily difficult either. It's pretty middle of the rung when it comes to difficulty. He does have West Coast this week, and West Coast they're just playing the kids almost at this point, and it's a situation where there's absolutely zero expectations, just looking forward to getting to the end of the year, doing the review, and getting another coach in, really. So it's, you never know. He might come in and capitalize on this, on the derby that they've got coming in this week, and he might be in for a big score.
Nice. What's your guys' thoughts on Max Gawn? Like you make a slither of cash. Now, he is highly owned still in large portions of the community. He has defined a lot of people's seasons. Nank was a point of difference selection and a hot streak player to boot. Big J, do you have any hesitancy to go to Max coming off that couple of weeks of absence as an advocacy? It's not saying to pick it over Cherry, but for the non-Gawn owners, is this a chance to either finally get him in or to return back to the ruckman that's been so good this year, or do you think we can steer clear now?
I think there's a bit of a difference with Max Gawn between post Petrarca and pre-Petrarca in terms of scoring. And I think just Melbourne's inability to win the ball out of the contest and do as well through the middle as what they have has really hurt him. There's definite ruckman, like Brodie Grundy gets a lot of points from the outs to advantage because Sydney's midfield is so good, right? Similar to a few other players. It's partly why Cherry's doing so well as well. LDU, Wardlaw will win the ball. Max Gawn, without a Petrarca in there, has really, really struggled. We look at some of his previous scores over the last couple of weeks, they haven't been great. The best one was against Koning. And if you don't have Cox in your team, Max Gawn, anyone's going to score well against you. So I think the type's passed. I think the ship's passed in this case, and go for someone else. Don't go for the guy that's probably still highly owned and things like that. And he is getting older, right? I'm not saying he's going to get injured again, but there's always that thing there. He's not a young player anymore. And Melbourne, they know they're not going to make finals, so they're more than likely just to rest him or limited game time and try and build on someone else because they need, this couple of last rounds has really shown that they need a number 2 ruckman coming. They're desperate for that player. So I can see him playing 80% game time, maybe a little bit of time everywhere else, putting someone else through there. just kind of gearing up for what would be next year versus the next 5 weeks where they're probably not going to make finals.
Yeah, it's a really good shout. And so De Koning is a clear-cut trade.
Yep.
And then we get to this interesting place for a couple of other pretty popular guys in different portions of the community that are out for probably 1 week. And I'm alluding to a Jordan Dawson, who's out with a concussion. Now, concussions are never a surefire thing. They're back the very next week, but let's make that assumption premise that it is a 1 week. We'll put Nankervis in that same consideration and conversation too, as a 1 week miss with concussion. And then Colby McKercher is out being managed, just a little bit sore. But I'm going to confidently lean into the fact that it's a 1 weeker rather so than anything else. It's not definitive, but let's call that a 1 weeker. Fisher, on the other hand, well, let's not talk about that just yet. That's way too painful for the coaches that got that poor score last week. It's triggering for everybody that's there. But MiniMonk, what do we do with our trades if we've got just 1 or 2 left and we've got these 1 week guys? What becomes the critical tipping point for us in your perspective and from your opinion that means, yes, you make that trade? And then what become the indicators for you to be go, you know what, I'm going to back it in and I'm going to hold and I'm going to wait? What's the lead and lag indicators for you here?
The factors you always have to consider is, how many trades do I have left? What's the run that the player I have has got for the rest of the season if they come back next week? So let's put it in examples of Dawson, Nankervis, who are just concussions. They're almost certainly back next week. Probably the same boat for McKercher, so probably back next week. And who can I trade to with 1 or maybe even 2 trades? And like, if you're also getting a downgrade rookie, which is the downgrade rookie that you're able to get to, can they provide reasonable cover? Are they someone like a Manor or a Dowling? I mean, Dowling's only 300k now, so you're probably not trading to him, but like someone who's actually got reasonable job security, reasonable scoring, potentially DPP as well. Those are the factors you have to really consider. And if we look at those 3 players, because those are probably the big 3, Nankervis, you're probably looking to hold. It's very hard to burn a ruck trade and be confident in who you're trading to, especially with the form that he's been in this year. The run's okay. McKercher, probably the same, especially with the DPP defender mid, and you can easily cover him. Like, I would be very shocked if people can't cover the red dot there, at least with someone maybe like an Evans or a Carroll or, you know, even a Dowling could DPP into some people's midfields as well, so they've got him. But the one I'd be really hesitant to try and hold and maybe try and trade if you can is actually Jordan Dawson. Yeah. Because of his last 4 midfield matchups in the rest of the season, 3 of them are really, really bad. Like, he's got the Western Bulldogs, he's got Port Adelaide, and he's got Sydney. Like, that is so, so rough to be able to score against as an inside midfielder for your last 3 games.
Yeah.
His price really makes it hard. It really does make it hard to find an opportunity to jump off of him. But if you can facilitate it with 1 trade, or if you've got, say, 3 or 4 trades left and you want to use 2 trades in doing that, I would definitely consider that.
It's a good point. Joe, does a league or a rankings mentality in these final 5 weeks of the year, does that for you, giving some encouragement and direction to coaches, does that become a definer for you as well? MiniMonk's talked about coverage and depth and options there, but does league or rankings define for you in any way of whether you would trade or hold a Dawson or a Nankervis?
Definitely, if you'd be looking at your matchup for this week in your leagues, especially if you're in a cash league, for example, where you're getting close to finals and you really want to make sure that you win this one, and that your overall ranking is one thing because you're playing sort of a longer term game. But when it comes to the leagues, it's a lot more immediate. And if you, for example, cop a donut this one particular week, then you could end up losing your league matchup and getting kicked out of finals. So I definitely do think that there is that slight difference when it comes to if you're a league-focused player or if you are an overall ranking type of player. That one, you definitely have a lot more of a leeway when it comes to the regular season if you're just playing overall. So definitely would consider trading them out, especially if you find the other side, for example, has got Gawn coming back you never know. Gawn might not necessarily be in tip-top shape. Coming back off that 2-week layoff, we saw a video of him in training, looked quite proppy. There was not awe-inspiring at all for me as an owner. I held on to him. I want him to come back in tip-top shape, but it looks like he's tippy-toeing around on the ground, and it's not tip-top. So I would maybe take advantage of that and trade out the injured player to get someone who's going to have a really positive matchup like Tristan Cherry.
It's true. So, Big J, I want to ask maybe a broader question for us. I think earlier you alluded to the fact you're out of trades now in SuperCoach. And you are not alone in that, by the way. There is a lot of the community is there. And there's been a mindset shift over probably the past 2 to 3 years, the way we've played the game. There's a bunch of different variable reasons for why we're being more aggressive with the way we use our trades. And I think running alongside that is a parallel of the AFL is being more, and rightfully so, careful with how we treat concussions. And so it's felt like this year more than ever before, SuperCoach relevant players have been impacted with concussions more than prior seasons. Again, that's linked to a bunch of different variable reasons. Does the way we've seen concussions come through and impact our SuperCoach relevant players this year more, does it change your trading philosophy moving into a 2025 thought process and mindset? Do you think it will change the way you will approach aggressive trading that you have done and been quite successful in too, and others as well in the community have done similar processes of 2 or 3 weeks now without a trade and just holding on for dear hope? Does it change the way you might think about playing the game in future seasons with the way the frequency, unfortunately, of concussions are coming and impacting the game?
I guess you kind of have to look at it twofold, right? You've got to assess it as it goes, and if it's a player that's had a lot of concussions in the past and they get concussed again, maybe there's a bit of a warning, don't pick this player and don't put yourself out there.
Sure.
But I'm going to toot my horn a little bit, but you guys saw my team coming, before this, and I have 27 players playing in my team, and I think that just goes down to coverage is king, really.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as you've got coverage across each line, I mean, we've seen it the last few weeks, right? Players have been out with injury, concussion or not, and the likes of Humphreys, the likes of Dowling, I've got Evans in the back line. These guys are scoring premium level numbers for us across lines, and the disadvantage of missing out with Fisher last week, people got Dowling 83. And I think the week before he scored 100 plus. So it all comes down to coverage is king, really. It's something that I've struggled with in the past, has not been having that coverage. Maybe you hold too many dead players and things like that. And I think maybe I had about 7 or so trades to go, let's say, just after the bye rounds, and was like, cool, I'm going to try and get rid of some dead players on my bench, because I know that injuries happen at some point, and as long as I've got guys who are playing, that 60 or 70 scores a lot better than donut. And I've seen that recently with my scoring. So we've been blessed that these guys are scoring primo level numbers, but just having coverage in general is really, I mean, you're never going to be able to navigate injuries. Any player can get injured at what time. The good coaches, though, will have coverage versus the ones that maybe haven't thought about it as much.
Yeah, it's a good shout. So for those that are needing to trade, Joe talked about the separation of leagues and rankings. I mean, he's talked about those that don't have the luxury of cover or are not happy with that loopholing process of they have an Evans, for example, who's playing Friday night. They're not happy with that score. And they've got a McKercher. Okay, now they're at critical junction decision point. Do I take the 50 or 60? Let's hope it's not that for those that are needing an 80 or 100 again, by the way. But for that scenario, MiniMonk, for those that have Dawson and Nank, let's talk specifically about those. If you've got a McKercher trade, then throw that to us as well. For those that are choosing to or have to make the trade, can you give me a couple of options of trades and at least one that sits on the more unique side? Again, for those that are trying to create separation to critically win or to create some gap in the top 1%, can you give us a couple of suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, I think I gave a relatively unique suggestion in the ruck line in Riley O'Brien. I'm not sure he's a very popular option. I do think that both Big J and Joe are right with regards to Cherry being the number one ruck option to trade into this week. I think if you're going into a ruckman from Nankervis or from Tom de Koning, that he's the one that stands out above the rest. in terms of midfielders, this is where it gets very fun because you want to target not only the players that have, a quote-unquote good run for the last 5, because not every fixture you're going to have from here until the end of the season is going to be a positive matchup. You're going to have a negative matchup along the way. That's just the nature of how matchups work. But you want to look for the teams that have a couple of positive matchups against the teams that allow the biggest scoring against them. And if you go to DFS, you look at the inside midfielder stats, the 2 big teams that are allowing big scores against them at the moment are West Coast and Melbourne. The next best team is Richmond. There's actually a team that faces all 3 of those in their run home. Gold Coast. Gold Coast have a run in their last 4 games of West Coast, Essendon, Melbourne, and Richmond.
Are you about to say Matt Rao? Because I will drive to Canberra myself.
Potentially Matt Rao or Noah Anderson. Either of those, absolutely players that you could look at for the run home. I think that there's a lot of coaches that have grown frustrated, particularly with Rao, because of how well he scored at the start of the season and how poor he's been scoring in the last few weeks. But man, if there's ever a time to jump onto someone while everyone else is jumping off of him, I think now is the time.
Well, Dawson doesn't exactly give you a lot of currency financially to move at 473k.
He does not.
A Rao is probably within your vicinity of feeling like caution to the wind kind of approach. So I like that. I'm not going to do it, but I like it. Again, it's fixturing. It's looking at that. And what was the start of the year? He was the safest 130 guy in SuperCoach over the first kind of 5 or 6 weeks of the year. So I think it's a good shout. Big Jay, have you got any suggestions for us? Again, if you are trading in Nankervis, I think you're very much championing Cherry would be the way to go. So maybe it's more Dawson then. If you're a Dawson owner and you have to trade, who are you looking to move into?
It really just depends, right? If you're going for someone who you don't have any cash, you've got $0 left, then you're kind of stuck. But yeah, if you've got some money, there's definitely a few players around the mark. I mean, Sarong's not much more expensive. Even Sam Walsh and stuff's not much more expensive. Tom Green has finally come back into some form. So, 30 or 40k gets you somewhere. If you've got 2 trades left, here's hypothetical, right? If you've got 2 trades left, maybe you go down to a Rao and you bank the money. I almost want to say, be a bit cheeky, go down to a Billy Dowling and then just say, cool, with my last trade, I can get anyone on the field in a couple of weeks and then go from there. The kid's on fire. He's popping out primo numbers, and I'm not sure what's happening with Matt Crouch in a couple of weeks, but I'm a big advocate of getting him if you've got no money and you want a primo downgrade, and even an Evans in the back line as well.
Yeah.
I currently have Nick Dacos in my midfield, which has allowed me to get another cheaper backline player. And they're scoring pretty close to premium level mids at the moment, or better. So, use the DPP if you can. Don't be like, midfield, I have to get a midfielder. A lot of us have not a Sheasel, a lot of us have a Nick Martin or a Dacos that you can swing into the midfield and grab a cheap defender.
Yeah, it's true. It's a good shout. Joe, bring us home. If we are trading a Nankervis and or a Dawson, who's your leading candidates that you'd be telling us to go towards? We
recommend best for Brisbane, and that's one Cam Rayner.
Now, jeez,
I said unique, so I asked for that, didn't I?
My word.
Yeah, he is. Look, he's had a great last couple of weeks.
He has.
He's not playing exclusively forward. He is having that midfield rotation. He's getting, hovering anywhere between 10% and 40% CBAs on any given week. And him having that extra exposure around the ball is allowing him to tackle more. He's getting some more tackles coming around, which obviously is helping to bolster up his score. He's one of those players that has the big frame and can bust through some tackles, so he's capable of getting some of those contested possessions, and we know, how valuable some contested possessions are. His run as a general forward is the 4th easiest in the competition. from here on out. He's got the Gold Coast Suns this week, which is a very positive matchup. Yeah, he's got a couple of difficult ones in St Kilda and the Giants between rounds 21 and rounds 22, but he ends off strong playing against Collingwood, who are cooked, and the Bombers at the Gabba as well. You know what I mean? So he's got he's got the fourth easiest run for general forwards. He's playing around the ball, and he's gonna give you some X factor. It's DPP, so he's not locked into one line either. So yeah, it's if you really want to be potty, then I don't mind the look of Cam Rayner.
Well, the brief was give me something that could be potentially unique. MiniMonk, are you jumping on board the Rayner train, or have you got another one to go with?
I've got one more that's unique as well.
Okay, all right.
And it's unique because he's had what many would have thought has been a bit of a down season compared to how good he was last year.
Okay.
He got nicknamed a bit towards the end of the last year because of his disposal efficiency. It's Sprayshaw, Andrew Brayshaw.
Oh, yes.
And as someone who watches Freo a lot, being a supporter of them, I've noticed that his game has developed a lot this year. He had to play a lot more outside to start off the year. They forced him a lot more to the outside. But now that they've found their mix, now that they've found how they want to play the ball, he's getting involved in a lot more of the hit-up marks, kicks, getting those plus sixes as we would in AFL fantasy. But also he's worked a lot on his clearance game.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty obvious to see that his scoring is much better when both Sean Darcy and Luke Jackson play compared to just Jackson. Now, if you look at their last 5 fixtures to come, it's nothing to write home about, but West Coast this week could be that spike score that you're looking for. So that's one way that you could particularly go. Essendon the week after, if they just roll out Draper, then, you know, Darcy and Jackson should have a field day against him. Geelong, Sam de Koning, same idea. Their midfield isn't exactly great.
No.
GWS, Briggs is okay as a tap-out ruckman. He's not the best, but their midfield can be pretty strong, especially if they get Cornelio back. And then Port Adelaide, you know, Sweet's not the most amazing ruckman, but their midfield dynamic is just phenomenal. So could give you a good 3 or 4 weeks out of him.
Well, there's a couple of options for people. Again, there's some big ceiling guys. There's a couple of unique ones, and also some guys that if you're skimping on cash a little bit, and most people that have just 1 or 2 trades left don't exactly have a bankroll of 6 figures sitting, waiting to be activated. If you do, well, now all of a sudden, the top of the tree guys become well and truly available to you if you've got that luxury. But for most, it's the one trigger trade is you're trying to look for. Joe, have you got another name for us?
Yeah. You mentioned him as an injury, the Koning. Well, why not his partner in crime, who's going to be solo rucking for the rest of the year in Mark Pittenay? You know, he's got the third easiest run to come on the way home. So
that's true
for all of the ruckmen as well. They're gonna come flying into finals contention. Into top 4 contention. You know, they're battling it out for that top spot there, Carlton. And he's going to have absolutely zero competition with De Koning out for the rest of the home and away season. It seems to be, it could be, you know, Mark Pittenay season from here on out. He's got Port this week at Marvel.
It's one of the best matchups,
next week, then the Hawks, then West Coast, and he finished with the Saints. So,
oh my goodness,
Mark
I could
Pittenay,
do that,
baby.
Oh, it gets to that point of the year too in the season where coaches that have lost care, and I say that objectively in the sense of rankings is not happening for them. Leagues, they don't care, or it's the inverse. Leagues, they care, but it's not happening for them. And so ranks, it does get to this point of the year too where you're like, you know what? Why not? And maybe you've had some parts of your season not go the way you want, whether it's league or rankings. The best thing you can do in these final 4, 5, 6 weeks of the season and last 1, 2, or 3 trades is do something that you normally wouldn't do and see if it creates an outcome that creates some learnings and things you could take away. So I like that, Joe. I actually like the creativity that sits there behind that. Big J, I want to ask you a little bit about captaincy. In fact, I want to get all of you boys' thoughts around captaincy usage. It's really outside of flipping your bench coverage if you've got some nice bench hygiene and depth, which you certainly do with 27 green dots this week. But outside of that, for coaches without a trade, the VC and C options are really the only way they can get some scoring differentiation in a significant way in their teams. And I'll ask all of you boys, but I'll start with you, Big J. Does the way you would use your VC candidacy and then also who becomes your safety C option, does that mindset change for you over these final 5 weeks at all? Or is it still the same approach for how you would normally target a vice captain or a captaincy option?
Well, I mean, for a guy that hasn't landed a captain score like myself, over
Great,
100
we'll talk to MiniMonk.
for the past 4 weeks, it's been terrible. I think I've averaged about 85 in my last 4 captaincies, going Houston and then last week Butters, and then a couple of weeks ago I think I might have picked a Heaney and then a Zach Merritt. So it's not worked well for me, but I think the biggest learning out of that, and something that a lot of coaches need to do, is, especially after last week, right? I think 40+% of the competition picked Zach Butters as captain. Go for someone who's consistent. We were just talking about this on our show just before, and Sam Flanders has got over 100 for every game of the season. If I had picked him over the last 4 weeks, I'd have a better captaincy score already. So maybe it's worth not necessarily trying to pick who has the monster score this week versus who has the most consistent score, because you don't know where the tag's coming. Every team's changing their mindset on let's give this person attention, and things like that. Just go for the most consistent player you can, really. I think that's probably the big thing.
Yeah,
as long as you're scoring 100, you might not be able to help other people scoring more, but you'll get a lot more coverage from the people scoring less, which is going to help you a lot in the next few games. Yeah,
it's a good shout. Mini, does it change your approach at all the final 5 weeks?
It all depends on what your focus is. Like if you're playing for leagues or playing for ranks, and especially if you're at the pointy end of ranks and you're really trying to get differential, really do your homework and identify what the fixtures are and why they are good for your particular player. You know, a lot of people will just go into a matchup and say, oh, they're playing against Melbourne. Melbourne have been pretty good for inside midfielders recently. I might captain a midfielder against them. But not look at the fact that Max Gawn is back this week. Maybe they might try and change the dynamic. Maybe it's a good place to target for something like a VC, but potentially not a captaincy type score. Whereas if there's a club that's doing the same thing week in, week out, that hasn't had much change associated with them, thinking something like a Geelong, who have been looking to run Sam de Koning as their ruckman, haven't really changed their midfield mix, might be worth targeting an inside midfield type player against them. Do your homework, have a look at the team sheets, see how that might change the dynamic for how the players you are looking to captain or vice captain may score, and then go from there.
That's good. Joe, any last thoughts you want to add around captaincy and vice captaincy mindset that we could have over these final weeks, and does it change from the previous 19 weeks of your SuperCoach season?
For me, no. For me, it doesn't change in terms of, because this is your highest scorer. This is going to be this big boost for your score, and ideally you've been trying to go for your best possible VC-C combination throughout the entire season, and that's not going to change from here on out. If you can nail your VC and C throughout the entire season, then you've had a very, very good season, and that's what you've been wanting to do from the beginning. And I think where the difference might lie is just in terms of the way different people approach their VC and C. Some, like MiniMonk mentioned, just simply look at the matchup and be like, all right, we'll go with that. But I think ideally what you'd want to do is you'd want to have your potential highest ceiling type of player be your vice captain in any particular week. You want this is a player that could potentially, if the stars align and things go as you hope that they would go and you can foresee them happening, then this is a player that can go absolutely bonkers. And the reason why you want this person as your VC is because you also then will be following up with a safe, reliable captain score, which might not necessarily have the ceiling that this vice captain might have, but you are more confident in, if something was to go wrong, this player is more likely to go 120. Whereas this other player, if things go right, you know they're going to fly. But if something goes wrong, they might end up scoring subpar. So I think ideally you enter into your VCC combination with that sort of setup. have your VC be your free hit that you really think is someone that could go bananas, and then have a nice, safe, solid captain following them.
MiniMonk?
Really identify where the last game that you have for that solid fixture is as well.
Yeah.
Like if we look at this week, the last fixture that happens is Adelaide versus Hawthorn. I'm not sure there's anyone I'd be really comfortable captaining in that game. Sydney versus Bulldogs, you'd probably say Goulden and Bontempelli would be relatively safe captains, but not when they're really facing off against each other. But if we go one game further back, we've got Collingwood versus Richmond. To me, that's where most people's captain, if they're going for a VCC and they're looking to go for any game, that's where your last safe captain is. And I'm obviously referring to Nick Dacos here.
Yeah.
So work back from there. Essentially, any game that happens on Friday night or Saturday night this week, you can look for a VC from and roll into Nick Dacos captain. Or if you like someone who's a captain in an earlier game and you like a VC from an earlier game, go for that. But always know where your last available option is. Yeah,
no, it's a really good shout. Before we wrap up the episode, I want to put you boys under the hammer a little bit. We will go with round the grounds with all of you, and I want you to make a big, bold prediction. But the good news is it only has to be a 5-week prediction. We are going to go defense, mid, ruck, and forward. I'm not shocked who Big J's ruck is going to be. He hasn't told me, but there's something, if you're watching this on YouTube, let alone listen to any of the said about stuff, he might be a little bit biased is probably not a strong enough term, but he definitely has a favourite, but he might surprise us, so we'll see how we go. So, boys, the challenge is this. Every line, I want you to tell me who you think will be the top scoring option for the final 5 weeks. Rounds that have gone mean nothing. So it's all about future forecasting to what might be. And it might help coaches that do have either some luxury trades or a little bit of cash and want to go right up to the top in different lines. It's like, yep, that's who I'm going to get. We are going to go position at a time. And our guests go first, MiniMonk, so it'll look like we've just stolen something if we've done that. So we'll see how we go. Big J, if there's one defender that you think is going to score the most points over the final 5 weeks, who and why?
I was going to make a really controversial pick, but...
Do it. Say it.
I was going to say Lockie Whitfield.
Hey, I like that.
I originally I wanted to pick Sheasel, right? I think Sheasel is very, very good and has the highest average that I've got basically on field, barring Luke Ryan, who's had a crappy last few games. But I think GWS they're just playing really well. And when the team plays well, Whitfield plays well. And it feels like the last few matchups, they haven't tagged him. And I hope that leads on to the next few games as well. Other people get the attention. Whitfield does well. Whitfield's scoring goes up. So, yeah.
All right. So we're backing in Whitfield for you as the number one defender for the final 5.
Yeah.
All right. I like it. Joe, who's your number one defender for total points over the final 5 weeks?
I am going to say the Marvel Stadium merchant that is Jack Sinclair.
Yes. Love it. Love it. Why, Jack? Is it just he's at Marvel and it's a great fixture for him?
Yeah, so he's at Marvel, good fixture, rotating between midfield and defence. They love the ball in his hands. I think St Kilda are clearly playing with a bit of a freedom now, knowing that finals isn't on the cards. They're just going to go out there, try and play their hardest. Doesn't matter if they lose in the process, but when you got nothing to play for, and it's all just about trying to stuff up your opposition's finals hopes and dreams, I can see Sinclair and the rest of the St Kilda boys getting up and about, and I can see the Marvel Stadium run at home all the way to the end going to be a really fitting end for Sinclair, I think.
Nice. I like it. MiniMonk, who's your best defender for the final 5? He's got that, just so you know, Big J and Joe, and those that have watched on YouTube before, MiniMonk gets this look and grin about him when he's about to drop something. And I feel like, if you haven't watched, subscribe. But Mini, Who are you about to drop on us? I fear. Are you heading Sicily territory right? You've got that look about you. That...
He was in the cards. He was one that I was just feathering with. I'm going to go a bit more spicier than that. I'm going to go a renewed role, a renewed purpose. Tom Stewart.
I like it. I like it.
His move into the midfield has been fantastic. He's been able to get the best of both worlds in terms of getting CBAs, getting wings attendances, and also drifting back for those intercept marks, which he gobbles up. And you know what? He is the second, he's up there in the top 5 or 6 highest averaging defenders in the last 3-round average.
Yeah.
And I just have the sneaking suspicion that he's not done yet.
I like that. I think it's a good chat. Well, let's work our way back the other way then. Let's head into the midfield. You've given us some good names, all you boys. Let's see what can happen. By the way, Luke Ryan's the current leader for total points and average in the defence. So love that you boys haven't played it safe in the back line. You've given us something a little bit more spicy. Bontempelli is the total points and average leader for mids. So let's see what happens here. MiniMonk, who's your best mid for the final 5 and why for 2024?
I do just have to have one very quick check.
Well, you can wait.
But I'll let someone else go and come back to me.
All right. Joe's got me covered. He won't let me down. Who's your best mid from now till the end of the season, Joe, and why?
I'm going to go with Big Chalky Neal. The guy's been on a tear this year. He's obviously playing for the Brisbane Lions, who have just found a renewed vigour, stirring win on the weekend against the flag favourites in the Swans. They're going to play against the Gold Coast Suns this week, and they are a very favourable matchup for inside mids. He's got the second easiest inside mid run home, and he ends the season playing against the Bombers at home at the Gabba. And we know this guy loves to play at the Gabba. He's in this Brownlow medal race to his eyeballs, and this one he actually deserves. Unlike last year's one, which sort of came out of nowhere. So I'm going to go with Chalky Neal.
I like it. I'm a fan of that. You've clearly spent some time with DR today, and it's not that's influenced you, but understandably, DR is an incredibly influential man of the Supercoach community. He would make me support Brisbane if I spent any more time with him. I don't need much of a reason to get off the Crows, to be honest, so he probably could win me over with some relative ease. MiniMonk, now you've had your reflection time. Who are you going for and why?
I have had my reflection
for the rest of the 5.
What if I told you that there's a player who's done 150s against 2 out of his 5 remaining opponents on his run home, and he also has the 2 easiest inside midfielders on his run home as well?
Oh, I'm interested.
He may be a player that I also mentioned earlier on in this episode.
Don't you
Noah Anderson.
Oh, thank goodness.
No, I wasn't going to say Matt Rowland to you again.
Don't you dare.
Noah Anderson. Yes, people might say, he's a people's first stadium merchant. He's averaging 140 there, which is absurd. He's only got 2 more games there to finish off the season, but he's also got West Coast at Optus, Essendon at Marvel, who he went 150 against earlier in the season, Melbourne at People's First, who he also went 150 against. Was it Melbourne? I can't remember now. I looked at it
with conviction. People won't challenge
Essendon and West Coast, he's gone 150 and 151 against earlier in the season.
At People First.
He has those in round 21 and 22, and then he has Melbourne and Richmond to finish the season.
Wow.
Hello.
Not bad.
Not bad. Big J, there's a couple that you got a trump there, mate. Where are you heading?
Mine beats everybody.
Oh, good man.
Mine you guys haven't even thought of. And going back on something that you mentioned before, my midfielder that's going to outscore everyone is Big Jack Sinclair, because I've got DPP and I pick him in the midfield. So sucked in. Projected scores, doing really well, plays all his games at Marvel. St Kilda, apparently they don't want to win games. They're just going to blood the kids, and he's going to play well off half-back in the midfield.
Why not?
Hey, why not? I'll just pick him, right?
Why
I can
not?
do the swing. I've got Dacos in the mids now. Just pretend that's Sinclair, and you're all set.
So Big J, have you said therefore that I won when it comes to my predicting of the number one defender. Because if the number one midfielder is Sinclair, they are not losing to the number one defender in Sinclair.
I don't know. Maybe.
Are you saying I won
defenders have been averaging pretty well. I'm just saying he's averaging everyone else.
Yeah, it's true. That might be the greatest swerve I've seen in any prediction on any SuperCoach podcast this year. So let's head to the rucks. I do feel like I'm about to waste my time with Big J's answer here, but is it just Cherry?
Look, I really like Cherry. I think he's going to be ultra consistent. I will pick him, but I'll put a bit of a sneaky on English. I think English is a half-decent run and has a higher ceiling than what Cherry does, but will have the lower games. And I don't think there's any super ultra consistent, outside of someone else who's probably going to get picked. So, yeah.
All right.
Cherry, but English with the side note there.
All right. I like it. Joe, who have you got? Are you also on the Cherry train? Or have you got somebody else that's a little bit different? The good news is Big J couldn't pick Sinclair here. So we knew we were safe with the suggestion there. Who do you think is going to be the best scoring ruckman over the final 5 weeks, Joe?
Well, I do think it's going to be Tristan Sherry. It's going to be him. But if anyone, I feel like if anyone's going to give him a curveball or give him something to think twice about, we're going to go with Mark Pittenay. I said his name before.
He is in.
We're going to go with Pittenay again, all right? He's got the third easiest matchups. He's solo rucking. There's no sharing with De Koning at all.
Wow.
Literally zero sharing from here on out. And, yeah, we're going to go with him. Stuff it.
Why not? Fully commit to it, Joe, which is one of the things I appreciate that the Set Abouts does, is that it is full commitment all the time. Yes. MiniMonk, there's Cherry, and there's Pitternet. So, again, a name I never thought would get mentioned at the top of a tree conversation. But we're here now. Joe's clearly had a long day at work. Who are you picking and why MiniMonk is the best scoring run for the final 5 weeks?
Let's have some fun with it.
Oh,
Sean Darcy.
Oh, don't you dare.
Yes.
The fridge himself. Yes. Sean Darcy.
Don't you dare.
All of the ogres. Get all the ogres in here.
Oh. And how many of these 5 weeks do you expect him to play, MiniMonk?
Oh, all 5.
Oh,
he's going to stay fit. And should I caveat my answer that he will be the top scoring ruck if he stays fit.
Yeah, that's the premise. Yeah.
He'll play one game, score a 140 in it, and then have the highest average out of everybody.
That's true. I didn't disclaim a total points, did I? I thought I might have, but that was the intent behind it, so that's okay. Well, let's look at the forwards.
I'm surprised no one picked Grundy. 3 games at home.
Yeah.
And then the other 2 games he plays Jordan Sweet and Sam Draper. So if I wasn't a biased North Melbourne supporter, I would have picked him.
It was also interesting that no one is picking Gawn either.
Yes.
Yeah, and a lot of people still holding on. So
me too.
Interesting whether that's scared off of the niggle, and Joe commented about some of the concerns that the track watchers have had, or just the fact that in 2 weeks' time Melbourne's season could be done and he's put to pasture to prepare for future seasons. It does understandably feel a little risky, but gosh, of any ruckman that could get a 154 or 5 week average, Gawn sits in that conversation of considerations to do it for sure. So it's definitely in the marker. Let's talk forwards. Who do we think could be the top 5 forward from now to the end of the year? I would have thought it might just be a conversation of which are the top 4 or 5 guys, but given Joe's propensity to give us something pretty spicy, and MiniMonk has also said Riley O'Brien's a prospect. That said, there was some caveats around that, so I'm not going to throw my fellow panelist under the bus here entirely, but you boys have given some great takes for us, which I've loved. It's given great ideologies for us to process, whether we're watching or listening through, to not just default back into it's these 4 guys. So I love that you've been giving us some unique perspectives throughout this. MiniMonk, first up at picking the best scoring forward for the final 5 weeks. Are we playing a straight bat, or are we getting Joe territory adventurous?
No, I think we have to play this one straight bat. I've talked about their run. We know that he's been playing as a half-backer, but pushing into the midfields recently. It has to be Sam Flanders.
Yeah. It's hard to go on the edge. Joe, is that who you've got there as well, or is there a bit of deviation from what Mini suggested?
No, it's I said in the preseason, before the preseason games even start, I declared Sam Flanders was going to be F1 for the season. And I know a lot of people were sort of questioning, is it worth starting him with the buys and some tough fixtures early on in the piece? And no, I was always bullish on sexy boy Ned Flanders, and I did declare him my F1 at the start of the season. And nothing, if anything, it's only been more solidified now. It's got to be sexy boy.
All right, fair enough. Big J, are we going to go for a trifecta of Flanders, or is there a chance somebody else could be the top of the tree forward over these final 5 weeks?
I mean, it's hard to ignore Flanders, right? But the player I've picked has had some new players come into his team this week, and did score 100 off 63% game time last week, and that's Big J Caldwell. I traded Fisher for him a couple of weeks ago. And since then, he's had some massive scores. Should have scored 140-odd this week. Obviously, the concussion, ribs, whatever it was, basically kicked him out of the game. And I think hopefully Parrish doesn't affect him too much, because I think that's really the only thing that's going to do it. But Caldwell going big is going to be the reason why Essendon stays in the top 8. We know what Zach Merritt can do, but Zach Merritt generally gets the attention, and that's why Caldwell's been going big. So if it's not Flanders, it has to be Caldwell, and that's who I'm putting my hand up for. If he plays, obviously, the rest of the 5 games. Of course.
It's an interesting name. I love this. It's going to help a lot of the Coaches Panel viewers and listeners with some creative stuff. MiniMonk, as always, mate, a pleasure talking SuperCoach with you. Another fine season so far, but it all hinges on the next 5 weeks. As always, mate, a pleasure talking SuperCoach with you, bud.
And as always, a pleasure to be here with you.
And the boys from the Centrebacks, Joe and Big J, people that have never had a chance to stumble across the great work you're doing in the SuperCoach community. A, where have you been? It's okay. There's forgiveness for all. But B, where can people get in touch with you guys? You're regularly dropping content through the season and the preseason. Where can we keep in touch with you guys with your podcasts and your video episodes, and also across social media?
Go for it, Big J.
Okay, cool. We post on the Centre Bounce on YouTube. Pretty easy to find there. We did quite a few videos during the preseason, and then streaming twice during the season, Monday nights and Thursdays when the team sheets happen. Follow us on YouTube, or the Centre Bounce up on Twitter as well.
Yeah, it's if you're like, where is that? What is it? The good news is in the description of this episode, we've got those links for you there too. So it's literally just a click away. Can I encourage you? There's some of the best people in the SuperCoach community. There's a lot of incredible people in the SuperCoach community, I've got to be honest, and some great content creators. I love this SuperCoach community and how advocating they are for one another and supportive of one another. It can be rare to find, but both Joe and Big J are two of the best in the community at supporting and elevating others. And so, boys, it's taken us a hot minute to be able to get you on the Coaches Panel podcast, but it won't be much longer before you get you back on. It's been a pleasure having you both on this episode.
Thanks for having us, mate.
Thanks,
fun.
MJ.
Anytime. If you want to go back and check out any of their stuff, again, the details and that are in the description of this episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, the good news is you can comment below and let us know, what are the trades you are making? Are you making a trade this week? I'd love to know. If you don't have the option of a trade, what's your V, C, or C moves? Let me know in the comments section below. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. These episodes are also available as an audio podcast, wherever you get your audio podcast from. You can subscribe and keep notified as soon as episodes drop. And you can become part of our Patreon supporter group. They get a ton of additional rewards depending on the tier level they're in. If you're up at that top tier level, you get 4 podcasts from the Coaches Panel a week. So well and truly worthwhile getting that, let alone the off-season and pre-season content you get. If you're heading into these final 5 weeks with rankings and a personal best in line, we wish you all the best and hope that your vice captaincy calls nail it early in the week so you're not stressed what to do waking up Sunday morning. If it's all about leagues, let's hope that this week the win you need to get lands your way and the top of the person on the league that's not you just goes full Bradbury fall over style, not where they Bradbury, but they that are against him do. That is what we're going to hope for you. But we wish you all the best. We'll be back next week talking all things Supercoach with you.